Hello, everybody. We are diving into Buddhism this week, our last religion for this particular module. So let's get on with it. Whoops, let me go back here. So after this, we will have worked entirely through the next to the last of these circles that represent a move from animism into polytheism, and monotheism into nature society, and then finally Christianity, Islam, and Sikhism. So we're now in this last one right here. Unlike the other two, which sprouted in China, Buddhism sprouts in India. I mentioned to you before that Buddha was a Hindu who, through a sequence of events, came to think of life and the religious or faith part of that experience differently. Began to think of it more as a way of awakening. What caused him to go through this moment of seeing life as a path of awakening, he was a very well taken care of prince. The story goes, and like with all stories about historic figures, and even non-historic figures, there are certain things in it that obviously can't be proven or disproven. So take the story at its value as a story, but no one knows for sure how the details actually played out in Buddha's life. But the story goes that he was born to a queen, married to a king over a feudal kingdom in India. Early on, his father was told that he would either be a great king that would unite all of India, or would become the founder of a great religion. So the king very much wanted him to be the great king that united all of India, and so he kept a Buddha sheltered in the various palaces that the king had around his part of India, not called then, of course, India. But one day, Buddha and his local royal charioteer were out for a spin. Maybe I don't know if a guy that had as much going for him as Buddha really had a weekend or not. He probably didn't need one. But as they went out, Buddha saw something. In fact, he saw four things he'd never seen before. The first was a sick person. The second was an old person. The third was a corpse. And the fourth one was an ascetic. So they're pictured here in this artwork. And these things had never confronted Buddha before. He lived a life of utter luxury, and every want he had was seen to, and suffering was just not part of his existence. The closest he came would have been the loss of his mother, which she died when he was a baby. But I'm sure he had pain about that when he grew up and heard the story. Anyway, it troubled him because he up until then had thought his life would be what it was for all time. That there would be no aging, there would be no sickness, there would be no death. That his life would be one of relative leisure. So he went back. He was 29 years old. He went back to the palace, told his wife that he was going on a spiritual journey, left his wife and his son, cut his hair, put on the robes of an ascetic, and left. And he went and found some ascetics, and he practiced with them. And he practiced for long enough that he basically became a skeleton with skin. And one day, he, being tired of this suffering of hunger, he ate. And this, of course, made all the other ascetics mad because they wanted to eat, but they were more committed, they thought, than he was to not lavishing themselves with the gift of nourishment. Who knows? And so Buddha left the community he was studying with, and he went and found a fig tree. He sat under it and swore that he would not get up from under the fig tree until he knew the answer for what he was seeking. And under that fig tree, the Bodhi tree, he was enlightened. And when people asked him what to call him, what name should they call him by, he said, the one who is awake. And basically, the word Buddha means the enlightened one, or the one who's awake. Okay? All right. So this is the significant areas of Buddha's life. You can see right here is where he attained enlightenment. He gave his first sermon here. In fact, he left, got up when he reached enlightenment, left, and went back to his kingdom, his community of ascetics, and told them what he had discovered about the impermanence of life. And we'll come on to that. They were profoundly moved and became his earliest followers. So this first sermon was in the area where he picked up his first followers, which were his oldest fellow travelers along the path he was on. He died in this area up here, born here in Lumbini. Went on his spiritual quest, sat down here, woke up enlightened, went here to give a sermon to his old friends, and ultimately died here. These were not the only places he ever went. These were the important places. In 3rd century BCE, so Buddha, this is 5th century BCE. By 3rd century BCE, there was a king that had united all of India. And his name, King Ashoka, he was also favorable towards Buddhism. So he had a lot to do with spreading the news of Buddhism and images of Buddha throughout India. So just a couple of hundred years after Buddha died. Oops, sorry. Oh, I'm going crazy here. Go crazy. Okay. So fast forward from 500 BCE of Buddha's birth, the spread of Buddhism in India, and 3rd century BCE, third, right? Hold on. Third, yeah, 3rd century under King Ashoka. And fast forward to today, where you will see how Buddhism spread from India. And it's not so unusual. It spread along trade routes, which is how a lot of religions spread, along with commerce and the interactions of people. So it spread across this whole of Asia, and the spread is now sort of characterized or cataloged by Southern transmission and Northern transmission, East Asian transmission, and a Western transmission. These all obviously didn't occur at one time. The Southern transmission is the Buddhism that we have today in Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia. The Northern transmission is Central Asia. Buddhism moved east into China, probably its biggest move, and then up here, here's my little arrow, up here over and down into Japan, Korea, and then ultimately Tibet as well, right over here. So Buddhism moved this way, then here, then up here, and down. But you can see how it spread into even Mongolia, Central Asia, at the time. And finally, Western transmission came much later, in the 18th and 19th century, I believe. We'll come on to that, I'm almost sure. But decades, not decades, centuries after the original spread across Asia. There are really three types of Buddhism originating in India. So you have these transmissions. Among them are three types. Theravada, sometimes called the lesser vehicle, Theravada. I don't know if it translates to lesser vehicle or not, but basically this is the way of the elders, right? These are the original, is the original line, seen as the fundamental formation of Buddhism. And these elders were the people who listened to Buddha and have passed down the transmission. Primarily monastics. So there's more of an emphasis on monastic commitment. And it's predominant in these countries that you see. And the emphasis is really on the individual's effort to seek putting an end to their suffering or finding their enlightenment. They have several important texts. You see those here. There's a translation for each one. The Tripitaka is probably of them the most important. It is the foundation canon, the Pali canon for Theravada, Mahayana, which we'll come on to in a minute, and Vajrayana. Vajrayana. I'm trying. So you get the idea. All right. Then there's Mahayana, the Great Vehicle. Now it's called the Great Vehicle, and given this title because the emphasis here is not just on monastics; it's also on people, just regular people following Buddhism. The Mahayana arm of Buddhism is much more liberal. By liberal, I mean encompassing of more of the culture that it's been put into. It has gods, it has goddesses. This is very unusual for Buddhism. In fact, Buddha didn't teach a theistic religion. This is predominantly in East Asia and parts of Southeast Asia. This includes the concept of a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is someone who can achieve enlightenment, but defers their own achievement of enlightenment in order to remain here on earth and help those who are still not awake, those who are still suffering. They focus on a set of sutras plus the Pali Canon, the Wisdom Sutras, Diamond Sutras, Lotus Sutra, Pure Land Sutra. I don't know for sure. I'd have to look it up, and in the middle of taping, I'm not going to do that. But you might want to look up and see if these are standalone books or if they are part of the Pali Canon. So that's a good homework assignment for you to look up. I'm sure that ChatGPT can give it to you in a second. There's some schools in the Mahayana Buddhism. One is Pure Land, and the Pure Land school believes that if you just call on this Buddha's name, that you will be quote unquote saved. You will maintain your enlightenment, or be enlightened if not, by calling out this name. Zen is an entirely different animal, so you can forget all this cosmology and stuff within the Zen school of Mahayana. Zen comes up out of China, and it's Buddhism heavily influenced by the pragmatism of the Chinese. So it's Buddhism applied, if you will. And then later there will be even more ways that Buddhism gets applied by Buddha followers such as Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a modern day follower of Buddha. a man who had a relationship with Martin Luther King Jr. based on both of their commitments to nonviolence. But Zen, or Chan, as it's called, and there's a parenthetical missing there, so I just need to put one of those in. Um, Zen or Chan is a process whereby practice is emphasized over doctrine, and mainly the practice of meditation, though not exclusively. But it's very much an individual effort, practiced within a sangha or group. So it's not quite an all by yourself Theravada type of Buddhism. This one has a community around it, but your progress is really part of, has a lot to do with your own effort. Right. Then there's the Vajrayana. I can't say all those. The diamond vehicle or thunderbolt vehicle. So you have the lesser vehicle, the greater vehicle, and then the diamond bolt vehicle or the thunderbolt vehicle, depending on how Vajrayana is said. Okay. Now this is predominant in Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, and Mongolia. So central and north parts of Asia. It's influenced by Mahayana, but it took its own path, particularly around the Tantric text. This is who the Dalai Lama, this is the version of Buddhism that the Dalai Lama is involved in. It's a very cosmologically heavy type of Buddhism, lots of figures in a realm that is not the physical. And reincarnations play a particular role in who is selected to be the Dalai Lama, for instance. So it's a little bit more institutionalized. It has a few more of the parts that we're used to seeing in religion, such as spiritual realm, the idea of being quote unquote enlightened, in that enlightenment carrying over into perhaps an afterlife type existence, or carrying over into your reincarnating, to what you reincarnate into. Whereas with basic Buddhism, fundamental Buddhism, Buddha did not believe that the human had a soul, and therefore there was no transmigration of the soul, no reincarnation of the soul. Reincarnation, which we'll talk about, came a different way. So Chan or Zen means meditation, and there is a device, koans, K-O-A-N-S, which are word puzzles, and these word puzzles are meant to cause your mind to step outside of what it thinks it knows, and be more open to experiencing something that it doesn't know, whether that something is a thought, a feeling, an emotion, or whatever. But it's opening yourself up to that which you do not know, and so you can see the truth of reality. This comes from a sermon that Buddha was giving once, and he had a flower. He held up the flower. He met eyes with a disciple in the back who smiled, and Buddha said that, not relying on words and letters, this student was enlightened in that moment because their mind pointed directly to the flower, and experienced that without any duality, without any separation, but in its fullness, in the fullness of that moment. Mahayana's approach meshed with Confucianism. It was the kind of internal roadmap for Confucianism. While externally you may have had your hierarchies, and in Zen even there's hierarchies, internally you were pursuing this enlightened state in order to diminish your suffering in this world. There are some new Buddhisms afoot: Rinzai Buddhism and Soto Buddhism. Rinzai, this is Zen, types of Zen. Rinzai Zen is the belief that enlightenment can happen like that. right? And you don't have to. You don't. You may be. This may be your first time meditating, and boom, you reach enlightenment. Now, does that happen as a rule? No, of course it doesn't. That's not generally how most people find their path to enlightenment. For most people, it's a gradual process. But Zen holds out that it can happen like that because of these koans and through the teachings of nature and life around us. If we pay attention, if we are paying attention, we are aware, then we are nearing enlightenment, and therefore, with that state of mind, or without it, really, in Rinzai Zen, you might be enlightened suddenly, out of time, without you having to put together, 1,000 hours of sitting on a map and trying to quiet your mind. With Soto Zen, however, the path is one that's gradual and slow. They would not trust someone who, sat down for the first time and got up and said, "I was enlightened." That would, for the Roto Zen, be a non-starter. This Tibetan Buddhism, this is our guy, the Dalai Lama. It's an esoteric, like I said before, esoteric Mahayana Buddhism. It's combined with some of the Tibetan local gods, goddesses, and tantric or female energy practices. So this is really a meshing of Buddhism with the local cosmology. The Lama is the teacher. The Tulku, is the reincarnated Lama. So that's the soul that is reincarnating each time that becomes the Dalai Lama. Dalai Lama is a title. It means ocean teacher. And the current Dalai Lama is Tenzin Gyatso, and he's the 14th Dalai Lama. There are a number of sects within Dalai Lamas, or within Tibetan Buddhism, that have to do with the tantric angle, some forbidden things that aren't really appropriate for everyone, only for these higher evolved beings, and then also some work that they do with mandalas. So mandalas are those paintings that are, multi-layered. They're usually round. There's usually a circle, and then within the circle, there's all sorts of things going on. Some of you did those did a mandala for your midterm project, so you know what I'm talking about. But they use those within meditation in seeking their enlightenment. Schools by location, you sort of get this here. Here's Theravada. Here's the Eastern and Southern schools. Here's Eastern and East Asian, all spread along here. Here's China and Japan and North and South Korea, all over here. I guess that's maybe Indonesia, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. But you can see how each one is concentrated around the particular areas where the transmissions of Buddhism occurred. There's even still some Dalit Buddhism, Dalit being the untouchables, but some of that is present here. So you get the idea. There's different flavors spread around. You could probably do a map like this, similar to this, with denominations in Christianity, except you wouldn't have these broad swatches, perhaps. You might, I don't know. It'd be a good project for somebody to take up, but not right now. Anyway, you get the idea there. So this Buddha, this Bodhisattva, is associated with compassion and mercy. And she manifests as female and sometimes as male. She's called Tara. In Tibetan Buddhism, she's called Guanyin in Chinese Buddhism. And she's the one to which the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum is invoked to gain blessings of compassion and to purify one's mind. Om Mani Padme Hum. So you may have heard that. That's a pretty popular one. This was many scholars believe that this was an attempt to give Buddhism a more feminine face, if you will, and that this bodhisattva is in and of herself a form of female Buddha. And for that reason, you can see why Tibet picked it up, right? Because it's a big part of their particular form of Buddhism. There's a big part of that centers on the feminine and feminine energies. All right, let's look at the content real quick. Not real quick, but quick. Not forever either. So the problem with Buddhism is suffering. People suffer. You remember Buddha went out and saw the four things. Well, those were four manifestations of suffering that happened. At least three of them happen to all of us, right? We get old, we get sick, we die. And some of us seek to make sense out of all this by denying ourselves earthly pleasures, so we don't keep thinking life is going to go a different way than it is. So the problem is the suffering that comes from these the presence of sickness and disease and death in our lives. The answer to that is nirvana, or awakening. And the techniques that Buddhism uses range from meditation, which is really common, to koans, which is very common for the Zens, and everything in between. Within Theravada Buddhism, the lesser vehicle, they're called arhats, the people who have attained enlightenment. Buddha was referred to as an arhat. In Mahayana, the exemplars are bodhisattvas and Buddhas, people who stay and try to enlighten those who have not yet gained enlightenment. Some of these, as we talked about, had monastic elements to them, but these monastic peoples, Buddha came to see those paths as an attempt to escape suffering, when in fact suffering, or at least the causes of it, age, illness, death, those things are natural, and therefore to become a Buddha you have to confront them head on. It's important to remember that Buddha was a Hindu. He did not maintain his Hinduism after all this. He departed from Hinduism. He famously quipped that there was no need to worry about whether there was a God or not until we had better control of ourselves as individuals and actually understood life for what it was. Now, the tricky part is he didn't really feel like we had a soul, right? He did not feel like that it was not his conviction that we had soul, but that we have something else, an anatta. Anatta versus an atman is like the no soul, anatta, and atman is to have a soul. So on the left of that equation, at the anatta, there is no God. Therefore, there's no one to oversee the reincarnation of people based on their actions. Furthermore, Buddha says there is no soul. No soul to a specific individual. There may be an oceanic sort of soul out there, of which we are all a piece, but there is no soul per se. In the same way that Western Greek philosophy and ultimately Christianity came to think about it. The cause of suffering is anicca. Anicca is impermanence. So this is the reason we hurt. The reason we hurt is we know that us and the people we love are going to get sick, they're going to get old, and they're going to die. But we pretend with ourselves and with our loved ones that none of that's really going to happen, that life is not in a state of flux, when in fact it is. And nothing is permanent. Remember Lauren in the parable of sowers, right? So in the parable of the sowers, Lauren says God is change, right? God is change. It's not a matter of morality or ethics or anything. God is change. And so the fact that we long for the stability that comes with having things that don't change. Our lives are naturally impermanent. Our existence is impermanent. Our love for one another changes and becomes over time a different thing than it was, maybe for ill, maybe for good. The idea here is that this suffering, or dukkha, is within our reach to escape from. And this is something that is vital to what are called the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism. The Four Noble Truths basically lay out Buddhism the way that it is and the way it's supposed to be, the way the path in Buddhism is supposed to go. First, you must realize that all life contains suffering. Everything in life has an element of suffering in it. You know, I mean, among other things, you'd have to say, well, that's curious, right? But everything in life has an element of suffering with it in it, and this is largely because we are attached to it, right? We only care about things that we are attached to in some way, shape, or form. Maybe our parents, maybe our siblings, maybe our friends here at school, maybe it's our brand new car. Who knows what it is? But at the end of the day, we attach to things and we desire that they not change. We desire that they stay the way they are because we like them and we're happy with them, and let's not go anywhere else right now and enjoy this. And for a few days, they may stay as they are, for a few weeks, for a few months, for a few years. But at the end of the day, everything is impermanent. You're impermanent. I'm impermanent. Everything I'm broadcasting on here is impermanent. And if we realize that and stop acting as if things that are impermanent, which is everything, as if those are really permanent, as if, we're never going to die, as if we don't change our consumption patterns, the world's going to be okay anyway. Climate change, somebody will come along and fix that, right? So we want things to be permanent, and things are impermanent, we suffer. Now, that suffering can be extinguished, and in order to extinguish that suffering, you have to travel the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is, you make a pledge to follow 8 things, 8 rather ethical things, and they're primarily organized under 3 headings: wisdom, actions, and meditation. Under wisdom, it is the right view and the right thought. So you know, Jesus said, if you lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. So basically, what's being said in this idea of right view, right thought is you have to keep your mind focused and non-judgmental and non-attached, and you'll be able to see things more clearly. So right thought in many ways would lead to right view, though I wouldn't put too fine a line on that, because I'm sure it's possible that the right view of something could give you the right thought. Right speech, right action, right livelihood. This gives you an idea of how serious these are. They're right down to not only should your speech be right and your actions be right, but your livelihood should not be one that harms any living creature, right? So no weapons manufacturers here, but even not necessarily a leather working shop, right? Depends on how far you take this other creature idea. But we know that coming out of Taoism, that the idea of an expansive definition of creature is in what they um, what they uh, what they are due from us as a creature. It's pretty broad. So you couldn't do a livelihood that harmed another quote unquote creature, including a large number of animals. Meditation is the last one, and it's composed of right effort, mindfulness, and contemplation. All right, there's a doctrine within um, Buddhism that has an association with the non-dual aspect of Taoism. And basically, this rule in Buddhism is that we need everything else in our creation to exist. In other words, and everything else in our creation needs us in order to exist. So we're interdependently co-creating this reality. It makes an interesting case, particularly given what we know about um, quantum physics and fields and that sort of thing. But the idea here is that you are an interconnection of various forces, not just your life, but you yourself. That the idea of self to a Buddhist is an idea that just doesn't lend itself to permanence. In fact, Buddha would say, how could you believe that your identity is permanent? How could you believe that your consciousness is permanent? These things are constantly changing. You change from one minute to the next. And if you try and hold on to what you are in this minute to carry it over into this one, at some point this is going to bring you significant suffering. So humans are composed in Buddhism of form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. And these things in and of themselves are just characteristics of the human being. Put together, they represent one aspect of identity that is pretty odd to us, the identity that comes from the interrelation of things. I only get to be because all these things come together and influence who I am in this moment. In the next moment, there may be a different layer of influence in there amongst them that would change me as a person. All right. Good. Contemporary Buddhism, there are some new sects of Buddhism. This is one that rose up. It's the newest religion in Japan today. It's a form of Buddhism that's a lot like the prosperity gospel. That's what I was thinking of. Prosperity gospel, where you pray for enlightenment in material goods. Enlightenment in the case of Buddha. Prosperity gospel, you're basically the basic assumption is that if you have great prosperity, it's because God is pleased with you. God keeps score by how God hands out the money, in other words. So this Soka Gaki is something like that. So I had it right, I think. Didn't I say 19th century? So in the 1800s, Protestant Buddhism grew up under this guy, Henry Steele Olcott. He converted to Buddhism, first one to do it as an American, became known as the White Buddhist. He wrote Buddha's Catechism in 1881 to describe his scientific and rational basis for the form of Buddhism, for his form of Buddhism. And it was really successful. It was translated into 20 languages. So HSO, Henry Steele Olcott, had a lot to do with the passing on of Buddhism. There's also in Myanmar a Buddhist leader. Myanmar has, and she's seen in sort of an ambiguous way, because in 1991, while she was imprisoned, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. She was imprisoned because the military enacted a coup in Myanmar to take her father out of office and imprisoned her and probably the rest of her family. And she, in fact, got out of prison, ultimately ran for office and was made they don't call them, I don't think they call them presidents, I think they call them CEOs or something like that, but she's the president of Myanmar, but not in control. The military still controls that country. And a Buddhist monk in '59 assassinated a Sri Lankan prime minister, and that started a war between the Muslims in I have no idea why, but I'm sure there's a political and religious reason that led to today animosity between the Buddhists and the Muslims. And since the Buddhists are the ruling group, there has been substantial violence, in fact, genocide in Myanmar. And so, what makes Aung San Suu Kyi an ambiguous figure is the fact that she did not stand up and stop the genocide. She let it play out. Now, in fairness, she may be a puppet administrator whose strings are held by the military, and she may have had very little choice. Maybe she weighed her options and said, at least if I don't prevent the military from doing what they're going to do here, I might have opportunity down the road to fix this another way. So to maintain power is the most important thing a politician. It's number one on top of their list, right? Because if they don't have power, they can't do their work. So she may have chose silence in order to retain her power. This is Thich Nhat Hanh right here, and Martin Luther King Jr. Thich Nhat Hanh invented a form of Buddhism called Engaged Buddhism. He rose out of Vietnam during the time of unrest there, and his Buddhism was a social, economic, and political justice engagement with society, and this resonated with King. So these two men met each other, I think, on two different occasions and discussed their values, their goals, their visions. Like King, Thich Nhat Hanh believed that the Buddhist practice must address suffering in all forms. And when I say like King, King saw Christianity as being necessarily engaged in fighting suffering of all forms. Thich had an emphasis on Buddha's values and compassion, values of compassion and loving kindness, and King believed that Jesus' values of compassion and loving kindness were central to his movement. And so you get here a kind of natural friendship, so much so that today, if you go down the picture, there you go. If you go down to Batesville, there's a Buddhist monastery down there. It's a lovely thing, and you can visit it. And on the grounds of the monastery, as you'll see if you watch this, is a statue of Martin Luther King Jr. and Thich Nhat Hanh. So that friendship today is celebrated still in Thich's followers, by Thich's followers. And this group here is an offshoot of Thich's followers from a monastery he had in France. But this monastery, Magnolia Grove Monastery, is in Batesville, Mississippi. So if we had time and buses, we'd go there because it'd be a great example of a great opportunity to learn about Buddhism. Anyway, that's pretty much it. It is it. So let me know if you have any questions. If you do, reach out. Otherwise, we are on our way from here to a final section on let's see, Christianity and Islam as empirical or empire religions, and then Sikhism as the most recent religion to take shape in our in human history, about 1400, so roughly a millennia ago, a thousand years ago. And we will do that religion, Sikhism, last. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye. See if I can find the off button.